Hello. I found a real interesting story here. It reminds me of Winston Churchill. It's written by Adam Kahn, and it's in the Chicken Soup for the Gardener's Soul. Chicken Soup has some very interesting stories. Just keep planting. Well, long before Paul Rokic was born, a copper smelter was built amid the lush trees and grasslands of northern Utah. The sulfur dioxide that poured out of the refinery turned the beautiful Ochre Mountains into a desolate wasteland. One day when Paul was 14, he showed another boy around his birthplace. When the young visitor looked at this wasteland and saw that there was nothing living there, no animals, no trees, no grass, no bushes, no birds, just 14,000 acres of black and barren land that even smelled bad. Well, this kid looked at Paul and said, "This place is crummy." Paul knocked him down. He felt insulted, but he looked around him and realized the boy was right. Paul made a decision. He vowed that someday he would bring life back to this land. Years went by, but Paul didn't outgrow his dream. Now a young man doing construction work, he went to the smelter office. He asked the company bosses if they had any plans to bring the trees back. No, they said. He asked if they would let him try to bring the trees back. No, they said again. They didn't want him on their land. Paul realized he needed to be more knowledgeable before anyone would pay attention to his dream. So he went to college to study botany. At the University of Utah, Paul met a professor who was an expert in the state's ecology. But the expert told Paul that the wasteland was beyond hope. "Your goal is foolish," the professor and his colleagues said. Even if Paul planted trees, and even if they grew, the wind would only blow the seeds 40 feet per year. That's all the dispersion you would get, the expert said. Because there weren't any birds or squirrels to spread the seeds further, and the seeds from those trees would need another 30 years before they started producing seeds of their own. Therefore, it would take about 20,000 years to revegetate that 6 square mile piece of earth. It would be a waste of life to try to replant the ochre. Paul's teachers said it just can't be done. So Paul tried to go on with his life. He got a job operating heavy equipment and married and had some kids. But his dream would not die. He kept studying up on the subject, and he kept thinking about it. And then one night, he stopped worrying about the so-called unattainable goal and began seizing the smaller opportunities right in front of him. That night, under the cover of darkness, Paul sneaked out into the wasteland with a backpack full of seedlings and started planting. For 7 hours, he planted seedlings. He did it again a week later. And every week after that, he made his secret journey into the wasteland and planted trees and shrubs and grass. Most of them died, but many survived and grew. For 15 years he did this. When a whole valley of his fir seedlings burned to the ground because of a careless sheep herder, Paul broke down and wept. Then he got up and kept planting. Freezing winds and blistering heat landslides and floods and fires destroying his work time and time again. But he kept planting. One night he found that a highway crew had clawed up tons of dirt for a road grade, and all the plants he had painstakingly planted in the area were gone. But Paul just kept planting. Week after week, year after year, he kept at it, against the opinion of the authorities, against the trespassing laws, against the devastation of road crews, against the wind and rain and heat, ... even against plain common sense. He just kept planting. Slowly, very slowly, more and more plants took root and spread. Then gophers appeared, then rabbits, and then porcupines. Nature was coming home to the ochre. It's called the ochres. Okay. The administrators at the old copper smelter eventually took notice of Paul's work and gave him permission to keep replanting. Later, in the face of political pressure to clean up the environment, they actually hired Paul to do what he had already been doing. They gave him machinery and crews, and his progress accelerated. Today, this former 14,000-acre wasteland is filled with trees and grass and bushes, rich with elk and eagles. And Paul Rokish has received almost every environmental award Utah has. He says, "I thought that if I got this started when I was dead and gone, people would come and see it. I never thought I'd live to see it myself." It took him until his hair turned white, but Paul managed to keep that impossible vow he made to himself as a child. Paul Rokish planted a wasteland, and one tree at a time, it grew. You know, Winston Churchill is the one that said, "Never give up." Thank you for listening.